So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. My name is Chris and I am joined today by Mike.
Hello.
And today, this is a New Year's special. So our co-host today is going to be optimism. And we're going to be very optimistic about the future. There's lots of headlines out there at the moment, but we are going to be very optimistic about this pod, about 2024, and about everything that's going to be happening during this year. So welcome. And if you are interested in subscribing, then obviously hit the subscribe on all the channels that you get your podcast from. And if you do want to leave a review or just hit those 5 stars, it really does help. And we would really appreciate it because the word is getting out there, Mike. People are seeing what we're doing. Have you seen that?
I've spoken to people and seen people messaging that they've been listening to the podcast, which is a very interesting thing when it happens.
It's flattering, I think. It's really
absolutely
nice to see it. Yeah. So, and more of it. It's great to know that it's hitting the right notes for our tribe. So, kicking things off, how was your week? We obviously are going out first week of January, so you'll have had Christmas by this time. But first off, how was your real week?
How was the real week? So the real week, which is the last week of work before Christmas, been pretty good. I'm currently now trying to reset my brain into optimism mode and switch off my intrinsic brummy negativity. So in optimism mode, I had a good week, a few days in London working with the team that I'm working with there, which was great. And I had a really nice time actually yesterday doing a retro over the past 12 months and what I've been up to over the past year. So in terms of positivity and optimism, it was actually quite nice seeing how my year generated from at the start of the year, not having much work on the horizon through to doing some really, really interesting stuff through the year. So, yeah.
That sounds good. And well managed pessimism there. So, it's good to see. And this is going to be going out in the new year. And I think it is, some people see New Year's resolutions and all of that as quite self-indulgent. Some people see it as a very, very necessary part of the year. So, and I certainly do. I'm always planning, to be honest. But my week was fun. I took the kids to E.T. in concert on the South Bank, which was pretty cool. It's a surefire way to kind of feel festive, even though it's not a Christmas film, but it's one of those Spielberg, John Williams combinations that sets the right tone. Amazing to see, like 100-piece philharmonic orchestra doing what they do.
So is that they play the film and there's a concert playing the music live? Is that how
exactly?
That
yeah. The film's playing. Imagine an orchestra pulpit. It's set up exactly the same, but the film's playing above them, and the orchestra are kind of half lit, so you can see them playing at the same time. And it's fascinating actually to see how they do it, because the conductor has to have the film going in front of him, and there's various prompts popping up on the screen all the time. So it was just really interesting, and the kids loved it. They were quite inspired, and I had a good old reminisce because I was 9 when that came out.
Wow.
And my daughter's 9 now, and Drew Barrymore was like 5.
Yeah, no,
in that film.
It's all very scary. I mean, to be honest, when you first said that about E.T. in concert, I did have a kind of like a pantomime E.T. image straight into my head, which is why I clarified, because I think pantomime E.T., I mean, it could be funny, but I don't think it would have been as moving.
No, and controversial, I know, but I'm not a big fan of pantomime. I love the idea of it, but I just can't get into it at all. And the other thing that I did was our lunch and learn, which was borrowing some facilitation tools and techniques from your good self. I saw your comment. You felt like you missed out.
Definitely.
But think of me as your young apprentice stepping into that chair. But it went really well. It's really nice to sort of have that structured, agendaless meeting with all of the members. And you never know what's going to come up. But as you always say, trust the process, and it really did work. There's some great people on there, some great tips.
That was a lean coffee, right? You did a lean coffee
Yes,
session.
it was a lean coffee, and if you don't know what that is, look it up.
Okay.
It's really cool.
No, I'm glad it worked, and I'm glad the process worked. It'd have been a nightmare if it hadn't, and then all of the times that I've said trust the process suddenly come crashing down into
Yeah,
nonsense.
yeah. If it didn't work, it was definitely because of me rather than the process, which almost happened. But anyway, so yeah, a good week. So what's happening in the world? Well, obviously this is going out first week of Jan. So hopefully nothing has been happening much in the world of work. Are you off, or are you
Well,
working a bit?
I'm planning to be mostly off. I've got a couple of bits of work which I've been prevaricating over for ages. So actually having a little bit of time to just sort of sit down and finish them off will probably be done. But I won't be doing much over the next couple of weeks, or I haven't done much over the last couple of weeks, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Does it you feel like you need thinking time for some of this stuff and you never get to it? That's how I feel.
It's more prevarication time. I need the deadline to hand it over to be real, and then I will actually do it. I don't.
Uh,
I do lots of thinking, so in my head I'm constantly making changes and planning the reports and whatever it is.
yeah,
But actually, the deadline is the thing that drives me. Actually, getting getting the inspiration to sit down and write stuff down. So
yeah.
yeah, there's that. But I mean, the other bit
Pressure.
is,
What do they say? Pressure makes diamonds. So
yeah, yeah.
that's the positive way of putting it, rather than
I,
I'm really crap with deadlines.
I might write that across the top. But obviously, the other thing, obviously, Christmas. I'm going back to the Brummie homeland for a couple of days to see the family, which will involve the festive sport of go-karting. So
Oh,
that was the way of bribing my kids to come along, was
is
to
that
let's go go-karting.
is that a family tradition then? All a bit of festive go karting
I
in the
think
roses.
it might be from this year on.
Well, that sounds good, and not a lot of work happening, which is good. I plan on doing absolutely nothing, to be honest with you. It's been
Excellent.
used most of December to replan the year. So hopefully I'm listening to this in January, you're listening to this in January, and I have kept to my words and I haven't done anything. And the team have sort of said, look, there's a few content pieces that we could work on in between Christmas and New Year. And I was like, no, just take the time off. I know it's great downtime and you all need thinking time for content. That's where I was going actually when I asked you. But yeah, you just also just need to switch off sometimes. So
Yeah, absolutely.
job done. Sounds good. So this podcast is our New Year's special, and we are going to be full of optimism about the future. And you suggested doing something a little different this week.
Yeah, I thought we could look at what we wanted to happen, or what we wanted to come up in the new year. So not exactly resolutions, but sort of aspirations and what we'd like to see happen over the next 12 months.
Excellent. So, and top of the list would be another quiz from Chris, as you do so
Yeah,
well.
funny you should say that. That was the first thing that I thought of.
Go on, then
Uh,
you start. What is at the top of your list then? I've got five things to go through. You go first.
Sort of in preparation to this, I wrote a blog yesterday, just sort of like going through, as I mentioned, doing a retro and sort of thinking about next year. So I've written them all down in a blog. And actually, as I started thinking, I realized that most of the things that I was saying were about this pod. So, so most of mine are podcast related, or a bit broader. So the first one is about sort of carrying on working with you really on leading the charge and leading this rebalancing from transformation being about technology to transformation being about people. I think there's
Mm.
a whole heap of things that you can do with the technology, but what we found from talking to people on the pod over the last couple of months is people first is the way, and getting the right people in the right place at the right time is really important.
I couldn't agree more. I think I said something on the podcast. I heard it when I was editing, and it reminded me that we had come up with this sort of joint mission of reducing the failure rate in transformation, right? It was sort of this, underlying reason for what we're doing. And we all know that transformation failure is rarely about the technology, or not rarely, but it's not the main reason. It's always on the adoption side, it's on the people side, it's on the engagement side. talked a bit to Hannah about the implementation, and I think that's where, for some reason, we don't invest a lot of time, or we take it for granted that people will just adapt and adopt. But we're not like that. So
Well,
I'm
I've
totally
got a
with
bit
you.
of I've got a bit of a theory on that. That the reason for that is that it's so hard to measure that bit. In terms of reporting and success and things like that, it's really hard to, has this transformation been successful? Yes, we've implemented the software, tick, that's easy to measure. Have we implemented the transformation? Yes, everybody's operating differently and thinking differently, really hard to measure. And I think it just comes back to what's easy to measure.
Yeah. So that's one of mine as well. So I'd say, I want this podcast, and I'd like all of the messaging and the work that I do, to be honest with you, to be about inspiring change and reducing that failure rate, and that is centered on people. I'll pick up the baton on the
Yeah,
people side of things. I think the other one that I would love to happen in 2024 is, and this is maybe a little bit self-serving, but the rise of the online business community. So podcasts, I think, are being used more and more and more to educate people, to connect people with real conversations. And I'll come on to GenAI and all that stuff, but I actually think it's going to become more important because of this shift in GenAI. And I actually think that they really want, connection. They want community. They want places where you can really sort of exchange ideas. And I mentioned the lunch and learn and the lean coffee approach, things like that. It's all about bringing people together to discuss things, but also to do it in a way where there is this psychological safety. And I had some lovely feedback today. I was talking to one of the team, and they sort of said, within Gen CFO, you've actually created a lot of psychological safety amongst the team. So we feel that we can say whatever we want and test and learn and make mistakes. And obviously, I do that in all of the community work that I do as well. So I think it's kind of I want the online business communities to evolve, not just Gen CFOs, but all of them, because I think they're going to be needed more and more and more. And if you can get the balance right between having sensible conversations with the right people in a safe space, then that is just gold dust for the people who bothered to turn up.
yeah, that makes perfect sense, and that is the magic. The thing that's going through my head is that we went through the pandemic and went through this rapid shift from office working to remote working, but none of that kind of the human experience that lived around remote working was really thought about. So I was working with people who were basically stuck in a flat on their own in London for hours and days on end without any other human contact than through the screen, and those screen contacts will work. So actually, those online communities for remote working and people that are having more hybrid working experiences, I think it's really going to be needed. So yeah, it makes perfect sense.
I sometimes talk about it, long before the pandemic, there was this third space theory, and I sometimes talk about it as a third space where it's somewhere in between work and home, because you can't have the same conversations in work and at home as you can do in these third spaces.
Yeah.
But it has shifted since the pandemic. I think you're right. And you make a really good point that people were just told to get on with it at first. And it was pretty inhumane how we
Yeah.
said to people, just stay at home and work and continue working. And, there's a massive debate about, whether we return to the office or not. And, introverts are happier, whatever. But I think just being more intentional and more humane about how we go about things is going to lead to great online communities, great online business communities. And as I said, there's no smoke and mirrors here, right? This is very self-serving in terms of Gen CFO, but I truly believe that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I agree. I can see it's not just Gen CFO. It is, but it is linked to the psychological safety, the openness, and actually having having that third space to talk. Where you would used to in the old days head down the pub, have a beer, and just chat to Sid, who happened to be down there. That doesn't exist anymore. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Poor old
So what's
Sid.
next on your list?
Um, so another pod one, but obviously over the past few months we've kicked off the podcast. We've had loads of really great guests, but we've had lots of finance chat, which I like the finance chat, but then my strapline of not being an accountant means I really want to bring some more data and digital and other people in to complement the kind of the finance gurus that you're finding. Because I think that one of the things that I found through my career is that we fall into silos really easily. And what I see from across different expert groups and from different people is that the experiences are common. What you can learn from someone that's worked in digital and apply in finance, or learn from somebody that's been working on mental health over there and apply just in business in general. I think that's where I'd like to explore further with sort of this podcast and the conversations that we're having, sort of scratching those. So I've got a list of names of people who I've tapped up, and I've got some people in my head that I'm going to tap up. But yeah, digital data people, but also people around mental health, well-being, and just all of the other stuff that goes around being successful in transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's sort of, I know obviously I've been in finance, that's where my network is, and that's kind of why, that I've got that leaning. But I absolutely agree with you that this is a general shift.
Yeah.
Transformation it is comes in many forms. It could be wholesale, it could be just functional. And I welcome that outside inside view. I welcome, the multidisciplinary approach. I also think that, high performance and sustainability is a general thing, as much as I do agree with what you're saying there. I want the digital finance function roles to be the sexiest in the profession. If not the world, right? I think there is so much, I think it was the Harvard Business Review a few years ago said, data science is the new and sexiest role in the world. And I thought there's so many aspects to this shift that are becoming more and more commonplace in leadership, digital first leadership, these sort of analytics translators roles that you talked about, translator role, the sort of CFO technologists, which they're not coding, they're just there to kind of make sure that we're getting the most out of the technology that's there. We even talked about prompt engineering, I think, in the last few weeks because of all the chat GPT stuff. Maybe not, but there's so many things that are, I think, empowering us to have different careers, better careers, sexy careers. And all right, might be, geeky to sort of think about these new careers, but I'm sure it resonates with our tribe who do get it.
So I completely hear what you're saying. I think I've got the sarcastic thing that's going off in my head, which is you said at the start that we're going to be optimistic. There's some optimism for you right there. That's the sarcastic comment, but the sort of more serious sort of response to that is how I see and reflecting on the people that we've spoken to over the past few months is that it doesn't matter what silo you sit in. You could sit in finance, or you could sit in digital, or you could be a journalism artist, or you could be whatever. Actually, it's about the people being really good and being able to explain what it is that they do and talk in a way. That's the thing that makes any role sexy, to use your word. It's actually the good people in those roles. It's not the roles themselves necessarily.
Yeah, but also like being motivated by that role and aligning it to your strengths. Like I
Yes.
think all the people that we've spoken to, there was this element of not knowing what role they wanted. Their role wasn't quite there yet, and when they found it, they were like, "Yeah, this is amazing," and then they're passionate about it and they talk about it and they want to do it every day, and it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. I think that's part of you oozing. I'm trying not to say sex appeal, but oozing passion about these roles, right? Because
Well,
they're
it's
aligned to your
enthusiasm.
strengths. Yeah,
It's enthusiasm. It's when you would choose to do what you do for your job because it's just natural. It's almost your hobby.
yeah.
That's when it becomes like, that enthusiasm oozes out of people.
And it's, and it's not a hobby, it's professional.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
it's
But
good.
but
It's
but
good to love your job.
that so I agree with that. But it is that comment that I made last week, which is work. We talk about work-life balance, but actually work is life. So yes, being
Mm.
professional, but it's still part of your life. You need to bring your whole human self to that role.
Brilliant. So what's next?
Well, I mean, touching on what we were just saying there, really. So we've um, we've spoken to some really interesting people over the last few months, and I've really enjoyed it. And what I realized when we were chatting last week, doing our sort of retro and thinking about how things have gone, is we've spoken to some people who are clearly in the middle of their own journeys, and they have their own stories to tell, and we've kind of got a little snapshot of it. And I wanted to sort of think about not altering, it's not the right word, looking at how we do the co-host role on the It's Not All About the Numbers podcast, and almost think about some of these people will get back as a regular co-host, or every so often they'll come back, a bit like Have I Got News for You, where you see the same faces series to series. Because I think that there's people have lots to offer. They're in their own stories, and it'd be great to hear how people are getting on within their own stories and how that relates to what we're talking about.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's it.
I would love to. I would love to sort of hear more from people. These podcasts could go on for hours. We did make a conscious decision, though, that there would be fast moving, and people would actually have they would wade in rather than it be an interview style. But I'm sure people would love to come back and talk
Yeah,
to us and wade in.
we'd
Um,
hope so. Hope so. Haven't seen the feedback saying no
if
way yet.
No, no, certainly not to our faces. And I love that idea. I think what the other one on my list was not just getting people back, but getting people together. If we had, it's not all about numbers live. I don't know whether it's Wembley or the NEC or whatever. um, but it would be great to get people together because there's an element of the kinship, and I definitely feel this is more for a tribe rather than for everybody in the world. And getting those people together would be fantastic for whatever it was, a big evening out or a big day out, and maybe basing the conversations and the the insights around what people want. That massive lean coffee approach.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We sort of mooted something similar to that recently, and I think that's a great idea. I think that there's so much in that. The experiences I've had where you get lots of people together that have sort of got a common thread, you just get some great stories, knowledge sharing, peer learning, but just networking. It can be
Yeah.
awesome. So yeah, I really would like to do that. A bit like a Radio One Roadshow from a while back, yeah, but
Well,
not quite.
yeah, yeah, just less music, or maybe we bring the music in
Bring the
and
music, bring the
some
music.
personality, some special. Yeah, just
As long
probably
as I'm not,
less.
as long as I'm not singing, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd love to get everybody together. I think that'd be good. The last one I've got on my list, and this is needed, I think, is a bit of a AI reality check. I actually said this about RPA a couple of years ago, which is robotic process automation. When sort of, but that's where you start to automate your processes with these bots. And I think there was this huge uptick in some of the big RPA providers, huge valuations of these companies. And as always, the hype curve drops back and people start to go, okay, maybe we need to consolidate the market, and maybe there isn't, the same number of use cases as we thought. Certainly not the same number that are prepared to be bought by people or implemented by people. And I think there's just a need for a bit of an AI reality check. I think people get it. I think people get that they need to lean into this, and GenAI is very much front and center and in people's faces, on people's phones. We were in the pub last night and someone was showing me an app that they were playing with to create images, and then I showed him my images. It was just all, very, very sort of real now. But I think that's going to mean that people do want to step away from that, and they want to have less content that's generated. I mentioned it last week, I think, about how much content might be generated by GenAI soon, or AI in general. And people are going to want real experiences and real conversations, and they're going to want to step away from the algorithms every now and again. So as great as it is to interact with these things, I think there's going to be a bit of a reality check where people go, you know what, I'm actually human, and I'll allow the AI intern to get on with that work, but I don't necessarily want to be all over that space. I want to be with people.
I get that. That makes sense. There's a number of things going on in my head. So I had a chat with somebody earlier on in the week who, in the data digital space, who said, "Oh, well, I was learning to code, but then I decided I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a user experience designer or whatever." And I said, "Why? It's right. You got Chat GPT now can help you code." He says, "Yeah, I'm actually learning prompt engineering now." So actually, just because we've got these kind of generative AIs in place and the large language models in place doesn't take the human job away, it changes it. So actually you're now working out how to prompt the AI rather than having to write the code yourself, but you still have to have that level of human engagement with it to do the thing that you do. So that's kind of like on one side, and again, backing up what you were just saying. But on the other side, so with my intellectual property rights hat on, I'm in this space now where we can do stuff so fast now, so quickly. In the pub, you can be generating images online by saying, show me a cat that's swimming in a swimming pool whilst carrying an umbrella, and it will create. But we had that engagement the other week, where you called me Minefield Mike, where you generated an image, and to generate that image, you'd input a photo of yourself and a prompt. And the question straight away is, well, who owns the photo of yourself that you've put into the generative AI? Because it won't be you, because somebody else took it of you. So technically, there's a whole heap of stuff that starts to come out of what we can do really quickly now that I don't think's even been thought of. It's almost like we're still in the magic stage. It all looks like magic and feels like magic at the moment. So we're playing with it because it's magic, and we haven't quite got to the consequence stage yet, which will come. When the eighth Harry Potter book is written by AI because somebody prompts it and it gets published, there will be questions about, okay, how does the law work around that? How does J.K. Rowling feel about that?
My point is more, it is twofold as well, actually. Yes, it's about how people are using Gen AI and how they're changing their roles as a result of that. But I think the other part of it is just people's use of it. I think there is actually a bit of a declining return, and I think it's one, like you said, it's magic. It's wonderfully powerful, right? But how many magic shows do you go to in your lifetime, let alone in a year, right? That after a while you're like, well, I wouldn't mind having a conversation about this rather than just relying on the algorithm to aggregate this information for me. How much of what I see online is just AI generated attention grabbing stuff? Can I have a conversation about this? Can I talk to someone? Can I get an opinion from this? So I think there's this I think the almost like the commodification of content will start to turn people off it. And I think that's also a bit of a reality check, because our behavior is going to win out. I believe in human beings, being smart enough to go, what, I don't really enjoy this journey. I'm going to change it.
So I realize what you're doing here. You've got your optimism hat on. So I like it. I can't resist my little bit of pessimism hat though, just to counter that, which is, at the last Gen CFO meet, I threw in that we've had forms of AI for ages, and Google Maps has a really good example where you can plug it into your car and it gives you a sat nav. You have a sat nav to wherever you want to go. So actually, the art of navigation now has turned to, we look at the phone in our pocket, and I think actually, my slight nervousness about your utopia that you described, that humans realize what's happening, is I don't see people putting their phones down anytime soon. everybody is
Come on,
still doing
Mike.
that.
Come on. We
Okay,
look.
ho ho
Keep it
ho.
up. Yeah, keep it
Cheer
optimistic.
up, Mike. Cheer up,
Yeah.
Mike.
No,
But I don't
I
see that
agree with you.
I don't
I agree.
necessarily see that being a bad thing. So my spin on that, my positive spin on that is I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing per se across the whole board. But it's almost like the genie's out the bottle. Things have changed. They will change. But I hope that the human element stays strong, right?
I have faith. I have
Yes.
faith. Although I have already seen examples of what you're talking about. We were walking around the West End trying to find a bar recently, and we were stood where it was meant to be. And you know, someone who I was with, who was a lot younger than me, got out their phone to work out where it was, and I stood there and used my eyes and saw where it was
Yeah.
and walked across the street to find the bar.
Yeah.
Whereas I turned around to see the face in phone trying to work out where it was. So yeah, behavior is an interesting one, but I have absolute faith in humans, and we're going to win out. And we're going to use technology. We are the masters of the technology, right?
Yes.
It's not the other way around, and we need to
Absolutely.
remember that. So interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Well, that was the meaningful bit. Now, normally at this stage we do questions, but I have a question for Mike, and Mike's got a question for me, I think, which is every week we do this good data, bad data bit, and we come up with one bit of good data, one bit of bad data each. But my question and this is almost like a live retro, right? Hot retro. When we do the good data, bad data bit, what is good data to you, and what is bad data to you, and what should we be bringing, and how can the audience help us bring this data to us as well?
The final part of that question is how can the audience, that's the clicking on the link, send us some messages based on this conversation, right? So I can answer that bit really quickly.
Hashtag good data.
Yeah. What's good data to me? So good data to me is data which communicates well the thing that it's trying to communicate with me in some respects. So we've been focusing on in conversations that we've had here, data that tells positive stories, which is fine. That is good data, but it's not necessarily always being presented in a good way, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
there's a great website called Information is Beautiful, which is all about how data gets visualized, and some of those visualizations are amazing. That's good data, and obviously the bad data is the opposite.
Yeah.
Data and information that you're getting that doesn't communicate the thing very well.
But this isn't just visualization that you're talking about, right? Because there's a risk that good data, bad data turns into good data viz and bad data visualization, right?
Agreed.
And it's not just that, because a bit of the right nomenclature on a project plan, or a sign on a door, is all data, right? So
Absolutely.
what else is it? If it's good data visualization, what else is good data?
Well, I mean, exactly that. So we did a thing. I did a thing a few years ago in DEFRA. So we talked about it previously with Matt on the releasing 8,000 open data sets in a year. So basically, here's 8,000 new open data sets. But part of the conversation was what actually is data, and we did this huge. Was it citizen science? I don't know if it's citizen science. That's far too grand a way of putting it. But on the thing that used to be called Twitter, we had a hashtag called "This is Data," and the people in the teams that I was working in and with would sort of look at things around and about and say, "Oh, this is data. This is data." So the braille information that is on a notice board on the lifts next to the buttons is data. It's data that tells you something.
Yeah.
The menu of what's going on in the restaurant and what you can go and have for lunch is data that you can use to do something with. The bus timetable is data that helps you get there. And I think the reason that we did this is people quite often think that we'll say, I'm not a data person, and opt out of even thinking about it. So good data for me is where people start to realize, actually, we are data driven as humans. our day. You know, the fact that you and I are on this thing right now is that we had an appointment in our diaries and we both used that data to be here at the same time. Some of us a few minutes later than others, but you know that.
Hey, I've been
but
told way too much recently that I'm always late and flaky.
but that's
Um,
data. You know
it's
that's
yeah, that's
data.
definitely bad data though, and I only put it down to being incredibly busy, and it's Christmas,
Of
so I can
course,
take my time.
of course. But I mean, even I mean, I'm clearly being facetious, but even that's data that you act on is like, you know, I know now working with you that
Yeah.
to give myself a couple of minutes buffer here and there because I know that I might be there.
Yeah, and I think we've talked lots of different subjects on this podcast so far, but there were things like we were talking about Boris Johnson potentially being colorblind, and actually, maybe four of the cabinet are probably colorblind, right? It's good data to have that.
Yeah.
But it's thinking in those ways, right? It's like,
Mhm.
what is there some magic's the wrong word. Is there something that I don't have now that I could have to make things a bit better? That's good data. Like, knowing that four people in the cabinet are colorblind, so I need to produce different reports, or knowing that, I probably can start the meeting at 5 past because, Chris is late, or because people just want to be sociable
Well,
and have a chat first or whatever.
so I know that some of the people that I know in data people will be freaking out now listening to this thinking, well, what you're talking about is information, you're not talking about data. So there's something there also around the for me, data is not a purist term. So I just wanted to put that in there as well. But yeah,
Data is
it is
whatever you
that
think it is, as
exactly.
long as
Yeah,
it's helpful. Yeah.
it's that link between what you're saying is that link between here's some evidence and this is the knowledge that I get from that evidence, or this is what I'm going to do with it that's useful. And for me, good data is when you can do something with the information, the data that you're getting.
But that is a very important point, right? Because you don't just collect data for the sake of data, right? You collect it for a reason,
Hmm.
and half of the battle with data is actually getting the right data in the first place.
Hmm.
So, and that's not just in terms of data quality; it's about data accessibility. Does it even exist, right? So, does the cabinet? I'll go back to it, but is there any data on invisible disabilities within MPs, right? A great bit. That would be a great data set. Why? Because when we can report in a particular way.
Good data, bad data. Good data is does this information exist? Probably. Bad data is it being acted on appropriately? No.
Yeah.
And I think that this bit of the podcast, it's almost, I think almost the conclusion I've got from this conversation is it can be whatever we want it to be as long as we're talking about information data in some way.
As long as we call it data, it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like yeah, it's like I've got some good news. Let's call it good data.
yeah.
I've got some
Well,
good viz. I've got some good, a good headline. Yeah, it can be whatever we want. But I would love people to contribute to this as well. I think people are living and breathing data, in their jobs. So if they do come across something that's particularly interesting, it would be good to
yeah.
have it, and you can send that into us, or you can just, as you say, hashtag us or whatever on LinkedIn or socials. But yeah, I think you're right. It can be whatever we want it to be. But I'm glad we had the conversation, because there was definitely something in there, and maybe not one for the purists, because data is a four-letter word after all. Yeah, who wants to own data? What? Room goes quiet. So that's it. That's our New Year's special. I think that was broadly optimistic. This
I
stuff is,
tried to be a little bit pessimistic in the middle, but I think I brought myself back round.
I think what you brought was the reality. This
Yeah,
is a complex area, and Chris, it's all well and good, high-fiving and saying let's get on with it, but there's a lot of nuance to this data, digital transformation, career change, remote working, flexibility, AI, Gen AI world, right? There's loads in
yeah.
there, and
Absolutely. You definitely also don't want to be that guy in the pub when you're showing phones of these new crazy apps going, "Want to be careful with that, mate. You don't want to be that person."
But equally, I don't know whether I want to be that person getting my phone out in the pub saying, "Look at my Gen AI generated images." There was a moment last night when I thought, "Oh God, is this the shape of the future?" This is we're sat in a pub, but this doesn't feel like a pub. But
At least you weren't texting each other. That would have been worse.
yeah, well, that's the next step. So yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic 2024. We are kicking off with next week with an amazing speaker. So look out for that. We have lots of speakers in the pipeline, as Mike said. We've already been doing a lot of work on that, and we've only really just got started. So do subscribe and do share the good news, and do share the good and bad data. And thanks very much for listening. I've only got one shout out this week, but it's a very important one. We had Lynn Titley come onto the podcast a few weeks ago, and she had just finished up at one job, and Lynn's got a job. She can't say what it is, but it's a great move for her. She's over the moon about it. She's very keen to get stuck in. She was at our lunch and learn yesterday, and a real advocate for peer learning and sharing. And I think a job just before Christmas is fantastic, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. So congratulations, Lynn.
Yeah, congratulations.
So any final thoughts?
Just to say Happy New Year and good luck to everybody for this Gen AI and AI future that we have in store for us over the next 12 months. And the final one is keep an eye out for the It's Not All About the Numbers big day out.
Yeah, coming to it's either going to be Wembley or I don't know what's the other one. The Millennium Dome.
I want the Albert Hall, to be honest.
The
I think
O2.
that suits me better, to be fair.
The Albert Hall, that's a bit highbrow, but yeah, no, I'll go with that. Yeah, it'll be great. It'll be great. It'll be great. I really look forward to that. I would love to make that happen in 2024. Yeah. And if there is anybody who's interested in being part of that or helping us with it, sponsoring it, who knows? That would be absolutely fantastic to do. So get in contact with us at podcast@generationcfo.com. Thank you for being part of today. And remember, it's not all about the numbers.